I know this is completely off topic, but right before this call, I was listening to the interview with Andre de Ruyter,
Oh,
which was the Escom CEO who, yeah, was poisoned and incredibly competent dude. Like just like listening to him talk, I'm like, damn, this guy is so smart. And then he starts going into how the power stations in Mpumalanga are just completely fucked, and how there's just all these criminal enterprises built around the supply chains that they essentially just are feeding off of these power plants, and how maintenance like sabotages plans so that more maintenance can happen. And so he's handed in his resignation, and I'm just like, shit, if this guy can't fix it, I don't know who can. I actually think it's unfixable, and that the only thing that we're going to see is like a shift away from Eskom being a power generator and more just a power distributor, and then the privatization of electricity generation.
yeah, I saw that I think, was it Treasury has just like announced another bailout. But I think it was interesting because they added conditions on the terms of the bailout in terms of like you have to start, scaling up the distribution network. You have to, and then there were a few other things which are kind of almost forcing Eskom's hand in terms of like potentially getting the people who build the power stations to actually like maintain it and look after it and operate it. But yeah, like I always kind of think about that in almost any sort of like negative industry, like whenever there's corruption, I think like it can go quite deep. You never know whose pocket you might be sort of preventing money going in. Like, so when it comes to like, especially those big government contracts, which can be in like the millions of rands, like people don't want that to stop coming in. And the unfortunate thing about corrupt people is that they don't mind using like unearthly means to get what they need,
Yeah,
even
it's
when
really
it's at
unfortunate.
when it's at the sort of like downfall of the whole sort of country. It's kind of like a short term thinking, which is really annoying because, or maybe it's not. I think it's maybe short term, but from their perspective, if you're an old guy, you're probably going to die like a lot sooner. So you'd rather have like a little bit of like wealth now that you can then distribute, but you're not really thinking like long term in terms of like, okay, let's get like some sort of consistent power. Everyone gets a benefit there, and then you could have a contract where you maybe even manufacturing for like European countries because you've got the capability to do that.
It's well, I think that the incentive systems are pretty straightforward over there. It's like if I do my job right, then I get paid my salary, or I get paid my contract, which is pretty good. I'm making money. Or if I am corrupt about it and I don't get caught, then I become filthy, filthy wealthy to the detriment of the system. And so the incentive is pretty backwards, because you're actually kind of incentivized to be corrupt because it's also kind of the norm over there, and there's such little policing going on. And but
And
that's
I
a
mean, it also
that's a whole other
also I
thing.
haven't done a lot of research into it, but I can't imagine there's that many sort of competitors when it comes to maintaining coal power stations. I mean, even like the one at Kuberg, I think that's also quite a an interesting challenge we have on our hands, where it's actually kind of getting to the end of its life cycle, and it's been like repurposed and it's had life extensions like I think twice before. But I mean, it's getting like pretty darn old. And for those who don't know, Kuberg is our only nuclear power station. It's actually a little bit outside of Cape Town, but yeah, it's pretty much getting to the end of its life. And I would imagine, I know like at UCT they had like a nuclear physics kind of department, but I don't know if there's like large companies that are doing nuclear refurbishment from South Africa. I think it's mostly like France and Russia that kind of send their peeps down to come and have a look.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that we're going to have an interesting next couple of years in South Africa. By the way, I just wrote a Telegram bot called Sheddy Sketty, which just sends me the load shedding schedule every morning
Mm.
and I've shared it with my family and
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
So, I mean, there's apps that do this, but I'm like, I don't want to install an app that's got ads.
I mean, there's actually like quite a firm use case for doing that in the UK in terms of like when strikes are happening, because there's so many different organizations that are all striking like at different times. It's almost like you can have like the same kind of notification system just to help you
Right.
plan your day.
Well, idea for your next
Oh
company.
yeah, I'll scale it to a billion dollar valuation, I think.
All right, so let's take a step back, and I want to tell you about a recent purchase that I've made.
I know about this purchase, and I have some questions.
Okay, so on Saturday, Emma and I bought a PlayStation 5, and it has been delightful. So we've gotten a bunch of co-op games. So we've got like Overcooked and It Takes Two. We've been making our way through It Takes Two, which is such a fun game. It's an asymmetric game where each of you play as a character, and all of the puzzles and platforming requires two people in order to make it through the level. And you each have different skills and different things that you do. And so it's actually a really, really nice way to spend time together, because Emma and I play a lot of board games, but there's only so many times that we can play Catan together.
Mm.
And then I've also been playing some of The Last of Us. I cried a little bit yesterday when thing happened in game that I won't spoil for anyone. But yeah, it's been
And
good.
what was the decision tree when it came to the old PlayStation versus Xbox versus what did it come down
So
to?
that
Do you
was
think do you look at like the game catalog, like what's available? Because I think these days
it's the game
it's quite
catalog.
transferable though.
Yeah, it's the game catalog, and also like I to be entirely honest, I didn't even consider getting an Xbox. I'm just like, I'm getting a PlayStation or a Switch. And the main reason is I've actually gotten a bit back into gaming this year. I just finished playing Metro Last Light, and it was delightful, but it's running on my M1 Mac, and my M1 Mac doesn't have like a dedicated graphics card, and I like prop it up on a book because the fan starts going, and it's not a gaming computer.
You need it.
And so I looked into like getting a gaming computer, and it's like, in order to get a gaming computer that actually plays games at a high, like at a decent level, you're going to be looking at 30 to 50,000 rand, where you can get a PlayStation, which is a dedicated gaming console, for 13,000 rand. I'm like, this is a no brainer.
Yeah, it's almost like with like computers, it's almost out of this world in terms of cost. Like and also like just being quite mobile, like there's no real need to have, all of those peripherals. Like I've always found that it's not just getting the computer, then you need to have like a really nice screen, you need to have all the sound and stuff that comes with it. And it's just like a whole hunk of metal that you don't really want to have like hanging around. I've
Hmm.
always been on the Xbox side a bit, to be honest, but I think if I was to get another console, and I really prefer console just because it's like, I'm getting old. It's plug and play. I don't have to like fangle around with all the settings. You just
That's exactly it. I don't
shove
want to
in the
mess around
cartridge,
with
or you
that.
download the cartridge, and you just click on a few buttons and you're playing, right? The one that's always like a bit of a like a left behind is like Nintendo. They have some interesting games, but what do you think about them?
Well, so the thing is that the Switch and Nintendo's gaming consoles in general are like, you do have games that are made not by Nintendo, but they're rarely for Nintendo games. Like, Nintendo is such a great video game producer that even if no other publishers published on the Switch, people would still buy them, because Nintendo just makes such good games. I mean, the entire, Super Mario universe, and I mean the universe, not just the game Super Mario universe,
Yeah,
Legend of Zelda, the Pokemon franchise. I mean, like they've actually got a really interesting history. They started out making playing cards, this specific kind of traditional Japanese playing card, over 100 years ago, and then they pivoted into video games around the arcade era, and the rest is history. But people will buy a Switch for that. The thing, though, is that a Switch is a handheld device that can also plug into a screen, and you can play your Smash and your Mario Kart and all of that, but it doesn't have the graphical performance of a PlayStation or an Xbox. And I I really wanted to play games like The Last of Us and everything. And while I really appreciate Nintendo's games, I wanted more variety.
yeah. I think before we get any further, I think it's best to start the show. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of Herman and Jason Spin the Yarn. And today we're going to be talking about interaction, games, and how we just hang out as 20 to 30 something year olds in the modern age of gaming. What was interesting about Nintendo that I saw recently, and it's kind of what spurred a little bit of this conversation, is that they've now, I think, there's like the company that makes Call of Duty. They've now said that they're going to make a port so that it works on Nintendo. So that's going to like open up the whole Nintendo ecosystem, I guess, to Call of Duty players. The other question is, do you play like multiplayer games like online at all, or is it mostly that you use it in terms of like a social hangout kind of situation?
So I'm going to answer this. I'm going to answer this question, but I'm going to answer it with a broader story,
Mm.
right? Is there was a very, very beautiful period of time that started in the early 2000s and ended in the early 20 teens. And that was the age of LAN parties. And I was actually thinking about this the other day and I got a little bit misty eyed because no other generation is ever going to experience this ever again. For those of you who are too young or don't know, a LAN party is when a whole bunch of people would bring their computers over to one of their friends' houses or a scout hole or a seal factory or wherever and hook them up with LAN cables, share video games and movies and everything between one another, and then play games against or with each other over the course of a weekend, or in the case of some larger ones like Rage, 4 days. And it was like peak social gaming is, and it was a physical constraint, is we didn't have internet that could handle online play at pretty much at all in the beginning and then very badly near the end. And so we had to go and hang out with each other for a weekend. And I think that there's something so socially cohesive about just going and hanging out around a joint activity with friends for 2 days. I mean, we don't really do much of that anymore, and that's actually quite a sad thing. But we just it was so beautiful that people would just come together and do that. And then as the internet got better and better, it started shifting more towards online only. And so I remember the last Rage that I went to, which is a big LAN conference, expo, whatever, is there were a bunch of games that you would play online while you were at Rage, which kind of negated the point of being in this, like, actually co-located. And then it died. And so I think the expo is still going on, but there's no LAN party anymore because there's no need for a LAN party anymore. And so I really love the idea of being in the same physical space as people and playing games with them. And so I love couch co op games. And that's why Emma and I are playing. It takes one of my good friends, Rico. I originally bonded with him over playing Guacamole co op. And that is like how I see games. I also see the personal experience of playing a beautiful single player game. But when it comes to socializing, I really love and I really miss the
Yeah.
the early 2000s.
Yeah, no, I also have like a couple of stories because it was just like a very interesting time, right? Because like our parents didn't have like any notion that computers were a thing when they were that age. So it was kind of like a really interesting coming of age time when there was like this new thing, like new computers. No one could really afford any of like the really like nice graphics cards. So you had these like shitty little things that you had to like plug together yourself in like the back room of your like parents' place. And then you had to try and install these games, and it like sometimes it wouldn't work, sometimes it would.
the
There was like
the first day of the LAN party would just be getting
yeah, I
everyone's
mean,
games
like
installed.
I learned a lot about networking when it came to like how you even connect those things together. When I first, I think the first one I went to, I was like looking at like switches and like routers and stuff. I'm like, what the heck is this? How does it even work? And then you just like you just reload and like hope that it like shows up your friend's computer, and then one would host and one would be like the client, and then you would connect and then you would play your games. But I think a lot of that is kind of like going away. And what was interesting for me is that at the time that things were going online, I was still in South Africa, and my computer was and the internet speeds were like a bit shit, to be honest. And so it kind of like pushed me. I did play online games for a bit, but then the internet quality was like really bad. because a lot of the servers were like hosted in like the UK or hosted in EU. There weren't that many South African servers unless you're a Dota player, which like they didn't even get started there. But that like low like access to the internet was actually what kind of pushed me away, because I was playing things like League of Legends, and then it just like the lag was too hard to like even like skill up. So I was just like, ah, this is like no use. And so I kind of
Mm.
missed the time of just having like a game that you could just play like without being connected. And I think what I've heard a lot from like PlayStation, some of the newer games that are coming out, it's all kind of like you have to be online, you have to be online to play the game, you have to like connect, and sometimes you even have to like pay to play the game, and also like things like pay to win.
So that's a whole other thing with monetization in games, which we can get to. But I think with the whole connecting to the internet to play games and having limited internet connection and stuff like that is I actually appreciated it, and yes, I appreciated it more in the LAN context because when I was playing against my friends, right? Let's say there's a group of 20 of us, I could reasonably be pretty good at, say, Counter Strike, right? And I could feel pretty confident in my game. Whereas, as soon as you start playing online, is you are not the best, and you are nowhere near the best, and you probably never will be. There will always be a 13-year-old who plays this for 12 hours straight and just pawns noobs, right? So recently I was on Hacker News and I saw someone had ported Counter Strike 1.6 to browser. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty neat. Let me give that a spin. So I opened up Counter Strike in browser. And yes, the ping was really bad because, I'm all the way down south. But even despite that, I didn't get a single kill. I just like walked into situations, just got completely owned. And that's like I actually much prefer playing with or against my immediate friends because it's like I don't want to compete on this larger level with strangers who this might be a thing that that's very important
Mm,
to them and therefore will be significantly better than me at it.
mm. I remember a time where it, even in Counter Strike, I think it was around when Source came out, and that was like mind blowing because it was like Half Life Source. It was kind of like the dream age of gaming, right? Because they were like it worked
Yeah.
really well. It didn't have like much lag. It was like really good like gameplay. You would get these like guilds or like groups. So if you go into like there were like a couple of tabs when you tried to like find a game, and you could go to that one tab and it just had like all of these like kind of groups. I never really got into them, but like that kind of grouping together with your friends, I guess was like the start of like I spoke to people that like met like people online that they'd never like seen in real life, all through these like Counter Strike guilds, or I think they were, I can't remember I think it was a clan, they called them clans.
Clans. Yeah, the
Yeah.
clans. And I mean like that goes even further if you talk about the people who were playing World of Warcraft, right? Is they would literally like have multi-year long relationships with people who they've never met, and they like would know each other so intimately, and then they'd like make a plan and meet each other in real life, and it's like, wow, so you're Jared 323,
You're also taking a risk
and
that
I
this
think
guy's
that.
not gonna like stab you when you go and see.
But I think that that's also kind of beautiful in a way. So if we take like a step further, is there were two things that I really enjoyed during the pandemic, and the one is that there's a little browser-based game called Scriblio, and Scriblio, it's kind of like Pictionary. So someone gets a word or phrase that they need to draw, and so they start drawing it, and then other people have to type in what they think it is, and then it word matches, and whoever gets it right first gets some points, and if you draw something where people get it really fast, you get points. And so I would play this with my family like once a week,
Mm.
and it was delightful. We're all there on a video call giggling and talking and playing this game. And then with friends, I would be playing Among Us, where it's also this highly, highly collaborative game where it's actually best if you're on a voice call with everyone, and so you're chatting away while you're doing this, and you're metagaming because the point of the game is to metagame. You're like, I think this guy's sus, and but you're actually
Yes,
the
assassin.
the baddie, right? And so There is definitely that factor that was great during the pandemic. However, I haven't played Scribblio or Among Us since the end of the pandemic.
So actually, like I didn't play Among Us during the pandemic. I didn't really catch that sort of wave. I remember there was quite like a huge thing about it, but I never really had the curiosity to go and try it out. But what I've been doing with my team actually more recently is like sometimes we'll have like a team building activity where we just like join a call and then we just play Among Us for a while, which is fun. And I actually kind of liked that style of gameplay, like quite simple kind of design. It's got like some elements of like strategy. I was always quite drawn to strategy games too, maybe more in the like first person shooters, but also like playing like League of Legends and those kind of things. Red Alert was always like a really cool game. So I like that it can kind of bring people together. But I think the thing is like, does that mean that we're now gonna move to a place where we spend more time inside of our bedrooms or inside of our living rooms playing Call of Duty with people we've never met? And do you think that gaming would ever be able to bring people together
Are you talking
physically?
about as a whole, or in for my life personally? Because as a whole, we're definitely seeing that is people are playing more video games than they ever have before, while being the loneliest that they ever have been before. Whereas I personally love like couch co-op video games. I'm gonna get some extra controllers so I can have like two friends over and we can all play Overcooked or something together. And it's also quite nice. I have a friend who how he spends time with his brother is he co-op plays one of those truck simulators, like American Truck
Oh wow.
Simulator or something like that. And they just drive through the United States and they chat on their radios. And I think that that's quite delightful. It's a really nice way to spend time with people who you don't usually spend time with. And actually, now I'm thinking about it after this episode, I'm gonna like see if there's any friends who I haven't hung out with in a bit who are keen to just hang out online. Like, let's take for instance my friends in the States. I'm not gonna see them for the next couple of years. I don't have any plans to go to the States. So why not spend some time virtually with them?
Yeah, no, I really like it. It's like a way to connect with people like over large distances. I also went like during my brief League of Legends phase, I also used to play with a couple of people. I think just having the Discord community, like having the live chats on top of like the gameplay, it always kind of was a way to just escape and kind of just have a bit of fun. And actually the games themselves, like the I like the challenge of a game is actually just really like compelling, and it's something that's like kind of interesting to do rather than just, reading's fun, but like after a while of reading books, you get a bit bored. So sometimes, it's cool to just like hash out a few rounds, get wrecked by some little kids, or and just like burn away a couple of evenings.
So I do like, okay, so for those of you listening who don't know, I actually come from a video game design background, and I really appreciate games as a interactive art form, as a media. And I think that what the most redeeming feature is for video games is like we've got the usual ones. It can be pretty, so visual arts. It can be auditorily immersive. It can be a great instance of storytelling. But the most important and the most unique part of video games is that it requires active engagement. Is the person is engaging with the subject matter. They're not just passively consuming it. And so when you watch a series or a movie, is you sit back and you watch it. When you read a book, you just read it. Whereas with a video game, you make choices. So one of the best definitions of video games is is intentionally solving problems, right? Or not necessarily solving problems, but like opting into a problem-solving situation. And yes, there are nuances over there, but it is very engaging, and in some cases it can be too engaging, and you do see people who get addicted to video
Mm.
games in the same way that people get addicted to gambling. But it is definitely a really nice stimulating form, and there are studies that have shown that people who do game, and this there could be correlation causation mix-ups over here, but people who do game frequently, actually have pretty decent reasoning skills and spatial recognition skills based purely on the fact that you are in a state of reasoning
Mm.
all the time and you're in a state of navigating a space. And it also can potentially help with sort of mental degeneration because you are keeping your mind engaged. Whereas one of the things that we see with people who are, say, getting dementia is that it's a, if they retire, they're more likely to get dementia because they're not actively engaging in something all the time. It's the whole use it or lose it phenomena.
Yeah, so I also think it's like you get like better reasoning skills. You get like I think anyone who's born from now on is basically gonna have this like comprehension of a digital world. And it kind of leads me to the like one of the topics that's been a bit buzzy at the moment. At the moment is Meta's kind of journey into AR and VR, and I think because you mentioned gambling too, when you ride the tubes quite a lot in London, you notice that quite a fair people are still playing Candy Crush. They're still playing like some of these like games. I think there's is it Wordles or something.
Wordle, yeah,
Wordle's
yeah,
like
yeah.
still quite a like a thing, and then there's like I've even saw people like doing 2 or 48 or something on like the flight I was on a couple of weeks back. So like people have these devices available. Do we think that like there's going to be a time where those games become kind of almost like everyone's playing them, kind of like Pokemon Go, but it's going to be something that everyone can kind of engage with and have like
Well,
because you're thinking about like bringing people together, but like can we take it to like the biggest scale ever where everyone's playing the game and it's something that people are doing all the time.
so I want to talk about two things that you just said over there that I think are fascinating. The first one is that Wordle was super unique in that it's a game that actually, everyone was playing, or like a lot of people were playing it, and everyone was playing the same game. Like people weren't on different levels because there was only one word per day, right? But it also had this like shareability built into it where you could share, what your bricks looked like on social media or on your family WhatsApp group or whatever. And that brought more and more people into the game. And it was actually like quite a delightful thing. I wouldn't be surprised if my mom is still playing Wordle every day. But Pokemon Go, wow, wow, what a time. So everyone was just out in the streets. Like the parks were full. It was actually pretty incredible for like 4 weeks. Society just kind of changed and everyone was outside experiencing
Yeah.
their cities and their neighborhoods and their parks. And like, of course, there were people like, "Oh, you can't catch Charizard in this place. It's a holy place," or whatever, which is fair enough. But that was overshadowed by the fact that there were people in parks
Yeah.
and walking around their cities. It was incredible. It was incredible. And I hope that we see something like that again because it was just such a smash hit. And obviously, it's like Pokemon is a really big recognized brand. I think it's one of the most valuable brands in the world or one of the most played games in the world or whatever. But it was huge. And even though the mechanic was kind of terrible, where you flick the Pokeball at the Pokemon, the whole walking around to geotagged areas and combining that with a brand that is very recognizable, because those geotags were just the same geotags that were used for Ingress, which was another game that studio had made, where you essentially had like capture the flag inside of your cities between different groups. um, but no, this one was, you go and you collect Pokemon, and wow, what a time!
I think it was fun, like having people walking around until it wasn't right because you got like people who would just like hire a taxi and like drive around just collecting these. And I think there's even like the Pokemon Go trainers or like people who would like go out and just like go and find Pokemon for you. Ca-
Oh, they you in order to hatch your eggs, you had to walk,
Oh, really?
right? So what they do is they just like walk around the block, or
Yes,
they
yes. There,
take
there was like a
your,
whole there was
10
like a whole time where
things.
they
Yeah.
actually were like people were trying to create hacks so like your phone had like it mimicked you moving around so that people didn't have to like actually go anywhere and they could just use this hack to like kind of change the firmware to do this geocoding kind of spoofing. It was quite interesting because the other crazy game that came out also with like the Nintendo branding is Flappy Bird. And it's weird, like there's kind of like a link there between, I guess, Pokemon. What I was thinking about that is that it kind of was timed very well, right? Because the kids who played Pokemon when they were kids kind of had like mobile phones when Pokemon Go became a thing. I think I was a little bit too old for it. Like, but my brother was quite into it, and like that kind of generation was just perfectly. I don't know if it was like perfectly placed at that time, or maybe the technology was all aligned that it kind of could work. But I think the thing is, it didn't like have that like longevity in it. It was kind of like a craze, similar to Flappy Bird, but it was like something that annoyed people. People were like really frustrated with it. I think there was also like an element of like sharing like broken laptops from like smashing your screen or pressing your screen too much.
Yeah. I think it's like it was the gaming equivalent of Heelys,
Yeah,
right? Remember for like a glorious year, 2 year, no, maybe just 1 year, every single teenager and child was skating around on a pair of wheels in their shoes. And then all the malls banned them. And then they just kind of died out. And that's also like one of those things I'm kind of sad about.
yeah. Like the thing is, like games were like such a big part of like the zeitgeist of like growing up, like being like a '90s kid. I read an interesting tweet the other day that someone was posturing that the reason why kids today are so depressed is because the music really sucks. And I was thinking the same of like games, right? Because like, you're not really getting I guess like some of the games coming out now, like I mean, Fallout's not a really recent game, is it? Like,
There are some recenter Fallouts,
yeah,
but
like
yeah, I know
like
what you.
what are like what are like the what are the kids playing these days? I don't know if that's like sound
Fortnite.
Fortnite.
Kids are playing Fortnite. All the kids are playing
Oh yeah,
Fortnite,
so
Jason.
yeah, Fortnite and the one where you build like things out of like really simple shapes.
So they've actually removed that mechanic from Fortnite because it was so buggy and it's not really used that well.
No,
Uh,
Minecraft. Like
oh,
so
Minecraft. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That
I mean, I played a lot of Minecraft in university.
I've never played Minecraft. I'll be like that you you're gonna frown on me for that one, but like I guess there's kind of like just those two games and
Yeah. Well, so Minecraft is Lego,
hmm,
right? It's just more. It's
it's a
like
digital Lego.
Lego that you can do cooler stuff with. You can, but you have to build your Lego first, and then the more things you build, the better you get at building, and the better you get at mining. And yeah, I mean, I saw a person. People have made like the fucking Taj Mahal in Minecraft, or they went and they made actual computers by using a thing called redstone, where you can actually make circuits. So they made transistors. Obviously, not very, not super huge ones, but like in terms of the actual in-game physical scale, massive. And so there's actually there's it's arguable that throughout all of human history, people have played games, right? Especially children, because it's the way that we learn, right? We actually learn significantly better through playing games in the same way that, say, puppies learn how to fight and hunt by playing, nippy nippy fight games when they're younger. This is actually the first sort of documentation of this as a very human characteristic is in the book Homo Ludens, which is kind of required reading for any aspiring game designer. And so we've always been playing games as a way to learn how to socialize, as a way to learn bodily coordination. And I think in a ever more digital world, it's kind of good that we have games that allow people to interact or learn how to interact better inside of a digital space. But obviously not too much. Like people do that we are seeing a wild amount of people who do not interact outside of a digital space and who aren't getting enough, social and physical stimulation.
Yeah, and it actually just reminded me, like, didn't China like introduce like a ban on like total amounts of gameplay you could have as like a under 21-year-old, or I think just in general. Like, so because that's on
Yeah.
the other end, right? Because games can be really fun and they can also be kind of addictive. And what I've seen is also like there's kind of this whole in-game economy kind of style game that's coming out, and that can become almost like it's like gambling. It's like you're playing a game, like the game is like kind of rigged that you're always playing against someone who's a little bit higher ranked than you. And then
So those are
they can kind
getting
of create these games that feel like you're winning, but actually you're
mm,
losing. And what
so
I
there are regulations coming out around those, especially in Europe, who's kind of at the forefront of trying to pass digital legislation. So there was one thing that was straight up banned quite recently, and that was the loot box system, where you have, let's take for instance, you can buy things in game with real world currency, and then you could also buy, or you could try your hand at loot boxes, and you'd get random. It's straight up gambling. It's like a slot machine, but for kids. And then there's this whole thing of just using in-game currency in general that I find quite unappealing, because what it does is it, firstly, you convert your actual currency to in-game currency, but they specifically make it quite opaque as to what the actual conversion rates are. So you'll like $1 will become 1,000 gems, or 2 bags of gold, right? And in order to purchase something, you need a combination of both bags of gold and gems. So it's really difficult for you to do the mental calculations in your mind and be like, okay, this over here costs $25,
yeah.
right? And but you can also earn those bags of gems and gold in game. You just can't really earn enough to really buy anything. So you are incentivized to purchase things. And so I have seen those implemented very poorly and very predatorily. But then again, I have also seen those implemented fairly well. So if you take a look at Dota 2, is you do have ways where you can buy things in their in-game store with real currency, but those things are really just skins to make yourself, cool in group, whatever. Especially considering this is where a lot of people socialize as a way to customize their character. There have actually been cases of kids in Fortnite bullying other kids who don't have custom skins,
Whoa.
because of course there is. But if it's not necessarily affecting the gameplay and the game is a free to play one, then the developers do need to be compensated somehow, and hoping that they aren't being predatory. And I know that Fortnite has engaged in some predatory stuff, like their store is always changing. So if you see something that you really want to buy, you have to buy it now, because tomorrow it's not going to be there again.
Mm, yeah, it's a tricky kind of world. What is your thoughts on indie games? Because like when it comes to new games coming out, it's really tough, right? And as far as I know, it hasn't gotten better. Like we haven't really seen. I mean, even maybe that's just because I'm out of the loop, but like, it seems like all of the like triple A games are still kind of around. Like Call of Duty comes out with like something new all the time. This like Battlefield franchise. I guess maybe like Skyrim and that series of Elder Scrolls is still being developed. GTA. You've got all the kind of like classics, but when it comes to indie games, and maybe define like what you think is an indie game, just because I don't think it's a topic that everyone would have heard about. And what would be a good way to like, first of all, what are indie games and how would you get one started and how do you make them profitable? Or do you make them profitable? Is it always
Well,
going to be like a passion project?
it depends. It's kind of like starting a software company, except it's significantly more competitive and a lot more risky. So it's good if you're really passionate about it, because you're not solving a real world problem. What you're doing is you're optimizing for fun, the ephemeral fun, like whatever that is, which is actually pretty difficult. But an indie game, it used to actually be very simple. What an indie game was, it was a self-published game, or a game that was independently published, not through your big publishers like Activision or whatever. But now indie game just means like a smallish studio. So we're talking in the zero money to, let's say, $1 million worth of money, where which seems like a lot, but actually game development is hard and expensive. Um, and indie titles are great. I mean, like, obviously there's a lot of trash. There's more trash than there are good games, but there are a lot of brilliant indie games by very passionate and very creative designers and developers. I'm currently playing one called Outer Wilds, which is this exploration game in space where you're trying to figure out what's happening, and the entire game is just about you exploring this sort of universe. And I highly recommend it. But in order to be successful at making an indie game right now, you have to have money. You have to be really lucky. You have to build something that's really fucking good, right? And then preferably have a publisher, even though you're technically an indie game. You need to have a publisher to actually make make noise about the game for you, because building a game as well as marketing and publishing a game is, whew, that's a
And
lot.
would you say the design part or the programming part is more important, or yeah, which would
They go hand in hand
would you
completely.
prefer to have like a really well designed game that's like really like kind of hard to play, or it wouldn't be like that because the design is built into like the mechanics, right? Or what is like what's the core piece of an indie game that has to be like if you have to do one thing, what is it?
The
It's the
mechanic,
mechanic, right?
right? Yeah. The core game loop. So if we take a look at, let's take for instance Super Mario, the core game loop of Super Mario is running and jumping, right? And that's actually what Nintendo does so well, is they take the core game loop and they polish it to a shine. They don't bother with all these ancillary things. Mario doesn't have an inventory system, right? I'm not sure about the more
Inventory
recent
of
games, but
mushrooms,
like,
yeah.
yeah, right. But it's like you don't have in-game menus where you're crafting things. You're not like picking up side missions from this and that. No. What they're doing is they are taking the what is a very, very fun mechanic, running and jumping, and they are making it super polished, and then they are building levels around that mechanic that are enjoyable.
Mm. And it's also like it reminds me because I think the first Nintendo only had like the direction keys on like A and B. So I think
Hmm.
it literally had to be simple because that was the hardware that they were working. I was actually
Yeah.
listening to a podcast recently about like the development of Nvidia and how it like got up and running and how it got started. And what was really fascinating is just like the amount of effort that goes into actually creating the game engine. Like because first of all, you're like as a designer, you're just kind of thinking, oh, I need to have this thing here and it needs to move across the screen like that. But as like getting that to actually render onto the screen is like a whole like
Oh
level of
yeah.
complicated that I'm like not even like remotely capable of understanding. And like
No, it's absolutely
even down
wild.
to like when I think when Nvidia started, they had like a four pixel like a four-sided cube was like the basis of their design rather than the kind of three kind of
The polygons,
yeah,
yeah.
three-pointed polygon. And the I think the reason why was just because of like the GPU architecture. They didn't quite understand how like geometry worked. So they're just like, oh, we could just do things with like four sides. It should be able to easily paint the plane. But like then mathematicians were like, no, actually, you need to have three sides, and that's like the perfect thing to make any kind of
Three sides are better.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
three
so then,
sides
but
are
then
more
they built
versatile.
their like GPUs to like understand four sided geometry but it was like so complicated and then you had to have this thing to convert it into like three-sided geometry. It was so wild. And like just
Yeah.
like the depth, like trying to squeeze that like power out of those like machines, it is really fascinating. And
What is really interesting is going and reading an old book on like how they programmed a game for the Commodore 64 or something like that, right? Fascinating stuff, because they're working with memory management. They're working like down in the nitty gritty, check this piece of memory, do that, and I'm sitting here with my game engine that like calculates lighting in real time, right? It's literally like doing calculations. If light comes from here and it bounces off of there, then it gets certain amount of diffusion, certain amount of glow, and then it's picked up by this camera, right? And then you've got like the Commodore 64 guys like MVC
yeah,
20015.
like literally like putting in the assembly instructions. I guess like we're coming to the end of the time, so I guess what's the future of gaming? I guess it's not like as hard to create a game like there's lots of engines that are out there, but it's really hard to create like a good game. Do you think
Yeah.
that's going to
It's
improve?
it's actually significantly harder to create a good game now than it was back in say 2011, because of how many competitors there are, right? Is like you create a pretty decent indie game by two people in 2011. Super Meat Boy is a great example of that, right? Smash hit. Fez, smash. You create something like that nowadays, it is completely drowned out by small but still large studios with 50 to 100 people making an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, I think that it it it's gonna get easier. I think to like the actual physical like software is gonna get easier because for these like big, if you look at like Epic Games, Unity, they want to incentivize more people to create games because the more games they have, the more chances of success hit, and that obviously goes into their profit incentives and all of that. So I think it's going to get easier, and also what I'm excited about is like some of that stuff being pushed into the web. So being able to play sort of quite hyper realistic games using things like, I mean, I don't think they use WebGL anymore, but like there's WebGL kind of technologies where you can load a get like a full game from the internet and you can play it almost as
Oh
if it
yeah,
was
we're
a
still
native.
using WebGL technologies. Hey, it's like my company just sketched me. It's using a game engine 3JS, which is just a neat JavaScript wrapper on top of WebGL.
Mm.
But yeah, let's let's see where the future takes us, and if it is in the web space and it becomes as easy as me just sharing a link with you, and we play an escape the room game while we record a podcast, that would be pretty dope.